Hi everyone, this is Stephanie at Hightower Stitching with today's video. It's number 193 and it has a great looking quilt. You can see it in the picture down here, and I'm going to go through the patches and sewing, a sewing hint for one part, and then actually giving you some ideas for sewing the blocks together. This is a fun quilt, and you can see it's got a Southwestern look to it. And every time I tried to come up with a creative name, I kept thinking Southwestern because I had made a baby blanket for a person, and they wanted it to have the Southwestern colors in it. And I actually used a pattern similar to this, except that it was made with strips of fabric, and it took a long time to put them all together. Well, what's neat about this, it's fun, it's pretty, and it only has squares in it. It's just squares. And so we'll get started in just a second. Now I had a couple of things as I got started because the pattern has 64 blocks in it. And I said, did I really want to go that far? I wasn't so sure. So I started thinking about table runners and smaller throws or things to use for decoration. And as I turned the page, then on about the second page over, I found this neat, smaller quilt made with the same pattern. But you can see that they've put these are 8-inch blocks, and they've set them on point, and it just looks wonderful. And I just wanted to share it with you because you can get to the whole pattern at allpeoplequilt.com 274. So that's online, and that's really nice. And I have nothing to do with the magazine. I just want you to have an option to go and look at another part of what I was working on. So I got that taken care of. Well, then I said, do I want to make them all the same color? And you can see they have red, but she had 8 different pieces of fabric that she used and then repeated it about 8 times each. 8 times 8, 64. So that turned out good, and I said, that still wasn't what I wanted to do. And so, you know what, I jumped back into my blue box. Last time it was brown, this time it was blue. And it's really funny because you don't use blue a lot unless you're making a blue quilt. And that's what I started to do. And you can see all my blocks that I have sitting at the edge of the table there. I actually have got 64 cut out. And I've been doing this in stages, so I had some sewn. I did some by hand and some by machine. And it's really nice either way. So I just grab a bunch and take them with me when I leave every week. And then I work on those now. And that'll help me to get this one done a little quicker, because I'm not always where my machine is. And this was one of the first blocks that I made. And what I have is I have my blues, but then you have a background. And they didn't have a solid background, but you could. And I just went and started trying to find my sort of a cream color, and then maybe having a little blue or something in it that makes it stand out. And I'll show you. Then this one is one that I've hand stitched. And you can see it really turned out nice. So this is a good project for that. And also, if you are just really starting to quilt, this is not a bad project for that. Because here's the way what happens is you have a 4.5-inch center block. And then you have 2.5-inch blocks. And they are on these two corners, the top right and the bottom left. Then you have a dark one and another dark one, and you can see these are still 2.5-inch blocks. Okay, now we're going to make a small change. We're going to go to, and if you have made triangle squares before, you know there's a couple of ways to do it. Well, the one way is to take and cut out your blocks at 2 7/8 inches, which is really not you know, and even then you have to trim them off. You have to check and make sure that they're 2.5 inch when you get done. Then their suggestion was, and I sort of went with this, it's easier to cut a 3 inch. And if you're going to have to go back and look at them to trim them, then I just cut the next blocks, and I cut 4 of the background color, and I cut 4 of my main color, because we're going to put those together to make half triangle squares. Okay, moving to the sewing machine, let's look at those half triangle squares for a minute. I have them pinned together so the fabric will stay, but then I unpinned them. And on these, this is back to something that we've done, and you do a lot now, is they have the one line from diagonal, going diagonally, and then you mark 1/4 of an inch on each side of that, or you, if you have it on your machine that you can follow it. Then I drew my lines, and I just use a mechanical pencil because I didn't want it to show up. Now this is really fun because you can do these with machine chaining. And so I've got my first one started there, and let's see, I'm trying this side. Go over on my right side, and on this one I went right down the line. Sometimes we talk about being inside the line or outside, but knowing that we're going to go back and look at this, and these started with 3-inch, got this straighten out here, 3-inch squares, which was just a little bit different, and then we trim them down to a 2.5-inch block. But you can just start, and you can do all of one block. I actually cut out a bunch of blocks for the whole thing, and then I would pull off only the 3-inch, which I put my lines in, and then I started doing my stitching. And so I'd cut a whole stack apart that I had sewn, and then I'd start all over again, and this time I'd go down the other side. And I do all of them down the other side. Well, as you went, I got caught there. Then you would take the next one. Now, this time I'm stopping on the right-hand side, so I just take this one over, and if I've got it turned this way and I don't need that side, I just flip it quick and run it down this way. Okay, now you have a nice stack of these because you've done them on the sewing machine. You're going to take, and I went and I cut all, this is what I like. I'm doing this better and better. If you have your end, I'll find one that's better. You can see the end, and you can see where my stitching is. I'm going to take, and you're not going to use a marker, but I am. I'm going to show you the kind of line that I'm going to do on each side, and I don't have to make a line, but this is what I'm thinking, is that I cut this, and I see that looks almost like a square or a little rectangle. I'm going to cut in, and I'm going to cut off. I'm going to flip the other one, and I'm going to cut in, and I'm going to cut off. Now you were going to cut those pieces off anyway along, but to me that was just fun to get it all at one time, because when you open it up, it's beautiful. Isn't that great? I love those colors. And then you open this up, and you can finger press it. That's the other thing that I liked about this pattern. You can do all this finger pressing and then not worry about doing a press job till the end. Now, if you'll happen to look at this, and if you've quilted before and made these, you would always have these puppy ears or cat ears. It looks more like cat ears to me on the end. You'd have to trim those off because they get in your way. But when you get to this part, it's really nice. And then you'd be ready to lay this down with your ruler with its 45-degree angle lined up and set it at 2.5 inches. And sometimes you trim even at a 3-inch, and then sometimes you don't. And that's really nice. So that takes care of making all of those by doing that cutout. Okay, so now the next thing I wanted to do was, let's go back to look at our block. And I'm going to set it up right here on my sewing machine because this, oh, and you can see that's not right. There it is. All right, it's because you've got your lights up and that. Now, here are a whole bunch of my triangle squares I made. And you're going to watch your placement. You're never going to have a blue next to a blue like that. That's going to help you because you're going to turn that one that way. And the one next to it is going to be turned the same way. And if you notice, you don't have a cream next to a cream like that one. And then you come down, and I went ahead, and when I got ready to sew, I set them all up. You can come up with all kinds of ways depending on your skill with your sewing and whether you're too tired or whatever to get ready. And you see how it comes together as you go. A lot of neat ways to do it. It's got a lot of opportunities for chain stitching if you've got to do this in a hurry to get ready for somebody's gift. And if you look there again, the blue is always against a cream, and the darks are always up here in the corner, and it looks like that. Now, when I got ready to do this, and I had it sitting here, I had some goofy times at first about turning the blocks. That's why this is sitting here like this, because no matter how I do, all of a sudden I'd have one that I sewed these together wrong for some reason. So I said, okay, I'm going to go ahead and go across, and I'm going to do the top row. And I'd pin it together, and I'm going to keep going because I'm hoping that I'm paying attention and I won't mess up. And do your 1/4 of an inch. I always feel like I'm going fast, but I want you to have everything that you need to be able to do it. And then I'd stop and go ahead and finger press this. That's what I'm saying, that and it doesn't take but a second. And then you take the other one, and let's see, I've got that going right. See, I messed them up, so I have to look at it and see that's right. And if you're doing a bunch of them, you can come up with a way that you can do pairs, because that's how I started too. I said, I'm going to take every set of triangle squares and I'm going to sew those together. But then I kept having to turn them, and I said, I'm not going to do that anymore. And then when I get done, I'll have a whole block done. So I came over and got this side, and all of a sudden I'm going to have the top row ready. And you'll say, well, this is really will take a while. But I wanted them to be right. I didn't want to have to come back and take something out. And so there's my row for the top. And it's all ready, and everything's turned exactly the way it should be, and I've got my press open in the back. I'm just going to set it back down on my machine. And then I went clockwise. I said, okay, I'm going to come over to this one, and you can tell that I have turned this. And you may have already noticed it before I got here, but that's the nice thing. When I got ready to sew it, I know it had gotten mixed. So I just lay it over, and I'm going to stitch this top up here. I had one of them, I don't know, I guess I got too tired, and I ended up having to take the stitching out twice. That tells you that it's time to take a break when it does that. All right, and you can open it up, and there you can see it's sitting just like it's supposed to. That blue is next to there, and this one's next to there. And then I just went ahead and I sewed this on because I knew where it went, had it in my hand. And I have about, but then I would stop and I'd go do some cutting. And then I do some pressing. And then I do some sewing of some of those triangle squares. You don't get bored, I'll tell you. And about the time you say, am I ever going to get these finished? All of a sudden, you're down to the last 3. And I said, oh my gosh, that's what I need to do my videos, so I'm going to leave it. And then I just and you can jump over and do this side if you want to. Or you can come over and do the bottom. It's not going to matter. I'm just going to keep going the way I was because I was going clockwise. Because I always talk about getting distracted. Phone rings, somebody's at the door. The dog barks, you got to go check on the dog. You got to go make sure your water's running for your yard. Then I'm going to take the next one, and I'm just going to flip it right over. Now this one's not as hard to know where you're supposed to be stitching, so I'll get that side. Finger press it just for myself. And then I'm down to the last one. And so, did I empty the blue box of blue fabric? No. I don't know that it's possible. But it was really fun. Because you know what I like? I like going back and seeing the different materials. Because I start saying, oh, that was in so-and-so. Or that, I'm going to flip this one down, that was in this other quilt. And I think that's why I kind of liked looking at this quilt with this Southwestern look. Because it reminded me of that baby blanket. Because I had to change the size of the blocks. I had to go collect these colors. But you know, I even still snuck some baby stuff in there. That the color, the fabric fit perfectly into there. But this was going to be a quilt that you wouldn't see that unless you got up really close because I was going for the colors. Okay, and now when I look at this one, I've got it turned right. And I bet you know what comes next. Then you are ready to do your rows. Well, I got to do this other one first. Let's do him. I tell you, and I like sitting in here because I can see out the windows in the back. I had to have the windows in the kitchen replaced, and I have those open glass. It doesn't have any of the little bars in it. I feel like I'm at a picture show. Now we got it going. And then I'd grab some pins. Now, because I opened my seams, I'm going to pin those. And I'm going to be sewing from the left to the right. So I come on another technique. Every time I think I've got, oh yeah, that's great. Then go over and do the other one where they match up. I'm going from the left to the right. So I'm going to put the pin on the left side. Then if you like to fold one seam to one side and one to the other so they lock, that's the other great thing. I tell you, that's the funny thing too. It just occurred to me that when you're working on quilts and you're trying to tell somebody a way to do something, and there's so many options for quilting, and you'll hear a lot of people say, it's the way that you're comfortable with it. And I want to move that pin. And the thing I found out about this row of stitching, when you get ready to press it, see how well that went together? And I just had to match it at those two places. I mean, I get shocked sometimes that it's like magic. But this one, there is a big clump of fabric that gets right here, and it wants to fold that way. And that's what I do, because when you try to open it, to press it as an open thing, you'll feel that lump right there, and probably wouldn't want to do that when you're hand sewing or hit it with your sewing machine. So that takes care of that. And then you would do the same thing to add this one on the bottom. And it'd probably be a neat idea. I made this and I used it until I got my couple of blocks going, and then I figured out what I was doing. But the reminder about making your triangle squares, start with a 3 instead of 2 7/8, because you still have to come and trim those down, whichever one that you use. And then I got a direction there that says this is up. All right. This is Stephanie at Hightower Stitching. I hope you enjoyed this one. I'm really looking forward to finishing the quilt so that I can see what kind of stitching is going to come on it. If I've forgotten anything, I'll write it in the description. I'm using time codes now so that you can find places quicker if you're starting. And don't forget that you can go online and get a free pattern that'll show you how to set up your squares, and then you can turn them either on point or do them like I am, where you just put them in a row. That's the one nice thing about this too. There's no sashing. You just got 8 by 8 blocks of any way that you want them to be. Thank you for watching.